Guys, I'm going to take up your homework from the last couple days. If you're interested, I will try and make this as fast as possible. All right, explain the meaning of homeostasis and give an example of how homeostasis occurs in the body. You could tell me almost anything. So blood sugar levels, oxygen levels, body temperature, okay? Anything that has to be maintained, salt concentrations, water concentrations, anything that has to be maintained at a certain level in our body would be completely correct. Describe thermoregulation on page 441. In humans, what occurs when the body temperature is too low? What occurs when body temperature is too high? Okay, that's a very easy question. When its body temperature is too low, we're going to increase our metabolism and warm, and we're going to shiver and do all those things. And that's what they're asking, right? When body temperature is too high, we're going to have our vasodilation when it's too high, and we're going to sweat, okay? When an animal wakes in the morning, its core temperature is below a set point. How might an ectotherm and an endotherm respond to this situation differently? I gave you this question so you'd be forced to look up ectotherm versus endotherm. We are endotherms. We maintain a constant temperature, body temperature. These guys are at the will of the environment. Their body temperature is a result of the environment. So these guys are going to climb on a rock, okay, very slowly because their metabolism is so slow, like a lizard, and warm up in the sun. Okay, you and I are going to respond to this by going through thermoregulation and all those mechanisms in the feedback loop. Number 6, extremities such as the hands and feet are usually cooler than 37 degrees Celsius, which is the body's core temperature. Suggest a reason why your extremities would be cooler than your core, and that's because your core has all your vital internal organs that are functioning to keep you alive on a moment-to-moment basis, okay? Your hands and fingers aren't doing quite the same thing. They're sensory, but they're not keeping you alive moment-to-moment. So you've got to make sure that your core is at the right temperature for everything to occur properly, okay? And so I gave you only 1, 2, and 6. I'm just checking at the LMS page here. On page 441, sorry, 1, 2, 6 only. Okay, and so then we move on to feedback loops. Oh, I have to take up these questions with you. That's right. So at this point, I'm going to take these guys up with you. All right. And when I was teaching thermoregulation, I was thinking about this diagram. Or not thermoregulation, sorry, the endocrine system. So when you start to look at the endocrine system videos, this is an excellent diagram for antagonistic pairs in the pancreas, okay? So keep this in mind because it's better than the one I have in the note as far as I'm concerned. So these guys are called antagonistic pairs. Insulin works when glucagon doesn't, and vice versa, okay? And what's the point? It's to maintain your blood sugar levels. So you need to have a glucose level around 90 milligrams for 100 milliliters of fluid in your body, okay? And so your body's desperately always trying to keep yourself in that range. So it says the image shows 2 different types of stimuli. Based on clues in the graphic, what are the 2 different stimuli? So the 2 different stimuli are high blood glucose levels and low blood glucose levels, all right? What happens when your blood sugar rises? So here we have blood sugar rising. So here we have beta cells. So your pancreas has a few different types of cells. One of those cells is a beta cell. So the beta cell in the pancreas gets activated and it produces insulin, all right? And what insulin does is it tells the liver, so now the liver's working in this too, it says to the liver, take glucose and make it into glycogen. We're going to store the glucose, okay? Because we don't need it right now. We don't need our blood sugar to be that high. And then as a result, the extra glucose is absorbed as glycogen in the liver, converted into glycogen, and our glucose levels decrease, okay? So that's what happens when your blood sugar rises. The next question asks you, what is the effect of glucagon and what cells release glucagon? So glucagon is the antagonistic hormone to insulin, okay? So glucagon, I'll color in a different color here, is made in alpha cells. So it says, what is the effect of glucagon? What cells release glucagon? So the alpha cells of the pancreas. So we're still talking about the pancreas, but we're talking about alpha cells. And this is really going to help you when you get into the endocrine system in the next day or so, okay? Remembering this feedback loop. So alpha cells in the pancreas secrete glucagon. What does glucagon do? It tells the liver to break down glycogen. So extra sugar is stored in our liver as glycogen, and it says to the liver, break down glycogen, release glucose. And so what happens then is our blood glucose levels increase. Okay, so this is going to cause an increase in blood glucose. That's what that's going to cause, and that's not bad if we need our blood glucose to be raised. And this is going to cause a decrease in blood glucose because our blood glucose levels were too high to begin with. Okay? And these are not donuts, even though you might think about donuts, because that's what I thought when I saw the diagram. I thought, oh, those are donuts showing glucose levels. Those are just indicating your blood cells. Okay? All right, question 4. What is the effect of insulin? What type of cells release insulin? So beta cells in the pancreas release insulin. What does insulin do? It decreases blood glucose. How does it do that? It tells the liver to take extra glucose from your blood and store it as glycogen. Okay, so glycogen is in the liver. Keep that in mind. What is the normal level of glucose in the body? We have it right here. 5, and then question 6. What would you expect to happen if your blood sugar was 120 milligrams per 100 milliliters of fluid? So in other words, we have a high blood glucose level. If we have a high blood glucose level, we need to decrease it. So what's going to happen is our pancreas is going to be stimulated. The beta cells particularly are going to be stimulated, and we're going to release insulin and go through this feedback loop. So here's a negative feedback loop. Here's another negative feedback loop. Question 7. A person with diabetes cannot regulate their blood sugar, mainly because the pancreas does not release insulin. To treat this disease, a person must monitor their blood sugar, right? And you know about that. And they must take injections of insulin. How do you think they would need to treat low blood glucose? So that's an easy answer. Hopefully you thought they just need to eat some sugar, okay? Consume some sugar in some way. Question 8 says, in a single sentence, explain the relationship between the pancreas and homeostasis. So in one sentence, the pancreas uses antagonistic hormones to maintain blood glucose levels. All right, antagonistic hormones to maintain blood glucose levels. And then we enter a different kind of feedback system. So negative feedback loop, okay? Now this one is a positive feedback loop. And I knew I was giving you these sheets, so I didn't want to mention this the other day because I wanted you guys to work through this on your own first. So what kind of feedback system is this? Oh, sorry, we're still on blood glucose, aren't we? That's question 9. So that would be negative, okay? And now we're starting with a positive feedback loop. A positive feedback loop just keeps feeding into the system over and over again, okay? So I'm going to start, I guess, right here. The brain stimulates the pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. Okay, so at some point in the pregnancy, the brain says, okay, the pregnancy is done. We need to release the baby from the uterus. So we'll start here. Pituitary gland is in charge of making oxytocin, which you'll learn in the next few days. And oxytocin is then carried in the bloodstream to the uterus. Okay, and what it does is it tells the uterus to have contractions. Okay, so oxytocin increases contractions. Then what that does is the contractions of the uterus push the baby against the cervix, okay? The cervix, which is the opening of the vagina, and that the pushing of the head along the cervix creates more nerve impulses to the brain, and what that does is it tells the pituitary gland to increase oxytocin. Oxytocin increases contractions, which bring the baby even further into the cervix, which keeps the whole thing going, okay? Positive feedback loop enhances each stimulus along the way. It's like a snowball effect. So is this an example of a positive feedback loop or negative? Definitely 100% positive, because we don't see an end in sight. It just keeps going. Now, there will be an end in sight, obviously, when the baby is born. And I do mention to you in the upcoming videos that oxytocin is then used to stimulate mammary glands to make milk. So you'll learn in terms of hormones, oftentimes these guys are just going to be taken back up, and we don't keep our hormone levels super, super high. Once we don't have a need for them, we take them apart and we recycle those parts. In this case, the levels are going to be super high because it's a positive feedback loop. It just keeps going and going. And so this actually results in stimulating the mammary glands to bring the milk in for that baby once it's left the body, okay? Do living systems use negative or positive feedback loops more often? Definitely 100% negative feedback loops are used. And I think I forgot to answer this question in the homework in the textbook, and so now I'm answering it for you. Definitely use negative feedback loops more often because positive feedback loops just increase the stimulus and the situation over and over again. But negative feedback loops end in a situation that we can live with. Okay, so in other words, they regulate. These guys help regulate the system. They bring about homeostasis by far at a greater rate and a more efficient rate than any positive feedback loop that we have. All right, and that's it for the homework.